Let's now take a look at what makes SketchUp really fast and efficient, and that is the inference engine. And the inference engine is always running in the background and helping us create meaningful relationships between the geometry in our SketchUp model. To take a look at the inference engine, let's first activate our line tool, which is that little pencil icon up at the top of your screen on the large tool set. We're going to click once in the top left corner of our screen. Anywhere in this quadrant here, I'll click one time to start, and then I'll start moving my cursor to the right. Notice that my active line turns red when it's aligned with the red axis. So we get this kind of rubber banding effect in SketchUp, and if I move my cursor to a point where that active line is parallel with my red axis, the active line turns red, letting me know that we're keeping things lined up. So that's the inference engine. That's one aspect of the inference engine running in the background, always helping us to keep things lined up. Now, as I come over here to the right, also take note that in the bottom right corner of your screen is the measurements dialog box. That's telling us our length. So the measurements dialog box is always awaiting our input. So we can just come over here and we'll get close to 50 feet and click once there. But now this time, let's move straight down on the green axis and let's give an exact dimension into our measurements dialog box. So you can see that right now I'm close to 25 feet. I'm going to let go of my mouse and type in 25 apostrophe enter. So you notice that the measurements dialog box, it is always awaiting our input, and so now we have a very exact dimension. We came down on the green axis by 25 feet. Now as I head back over here to the left, another component of the inference engine, you can see that we're projecting a guideline off of that first point that we drew. So you can see we have a dotted green line projecting down, and it's kind of snapping our active line to that distance and helping us to keep things lined up. So when it says from point, we can click once there and then head straight up on the green and we can connect the dots. Now when I connect that, I've created a closed loop of coplanar edges. So what does that mean? It means that each of these edges are touching end to end, and they are completely closed, and they're also coplanar. They all exist on the same z-plane. So they're all kind of a flat rectangle. So whenever you have a closed loop of coplanar edges, that allows you to create a surface. So there's two building blocks of geometry in SketchUp, edges and surfaces. And we can't have a surface without those edges. So let's take a look now at what happens when we break a closed loop of coplanar edges. If I go to my eraser tool up there on the large tool set, I can just click once on an edge, and I've deleted the edge, in turn breaking the closed loop of coplanar edges and also deleting my surface at the same time. But not to worry, we can always reheal this surface by retracing or redrawing in that line from endpoint to endpoint. So now we've closed that loop of coplanar edges again. Now let's take a moment to look at a really helpful tool, which is the selection tool. That's the little black arrow up there in the top left corner of your screen. The selection tool allows us to select edges and surfaces. And notice that right now if I click on the surface, it is one large surface. So in SketchUp we can divide a surface by drawing an edge and creating a new closed loop of coplanar edges. So we're going to use our line tool and then hover around on edge until you find your midpoint. We'll click once from midpoint to midpoint. And notice what happens now. If I go back to my selection tool, we now have divided the surface. So we have a closed loop of coplanar edges here, and then we have another one over here on the right side. So if I was to go to my eraser tool and delete an edge, you can see that we've only broken this closed loop, and we'll go ahead and reheal that with our line tool. Now, these two surfaces are divided right now. We can also delete this edge that divides them, and now we go back to one large surface. So surfaces can be broken, deleted, welded and rehealed, and we always can get back to this one solid rectangle, this one closed loop of coplanar edges. Now let's also take a moment to draw some other shapes on this circle. With my selection tool active, I'm going to right click in the white space, and that clears any selection that I have. So now let's check out the circle tool. Activate your circle tool, and notice that in the bottom right hand corner the measurements dialog box has switched to the number of sides. Right now the default number of sides is 24, and that's a pretty good balance. That's the SketchUp's default number of sides for a circle. It's a good balance between file size and creating enough surfaces to accurately represent a circle, and at the same time not generate so much extra geometry that we have a huge model. So a common question here is the number of sides on a circle. Well, a circle should only have one side, but in SketchUp there's only two building blocks to create geometry, edges and surfaces. So we need a series of edges to create the illusion of a circle. The more sides we give it, the smoother that circle will be. So we could at this point type in 100, enter, and then we'll click once to draw a circle, and you can see that that circle is very nice and smooth, but that's because it's composed of 100 sides. Now, something to keep in mind is that whenever you have changed the number of sides on your circle, that's your new default. So what we'll need to do is tap escape one time, and let's set our default back to 24. So I'll type 24, enter, and now we're back to our 24 sides. I can click once to start and click again to finish. So you can see how this circle is a little bit more jagged and boxy than this one. If I go to my selection tool, I can right click on the circle and choose Entity Info. Here you can see that we have 24 segments composing that circle. If I want to modify the amount of sides after the fact, I can always select it here, and let's try like 48, enter. So that might be a better number. The good thing about modifying a circle within your Entity Info dialog box is that that does not change your default number of sides on your circle. So we can close this guy out. Also, see what's happened here if you go to your selection tool. If I click on a surface, it's divided. So that means that we could right click on a surface and choose erase, and we can actually punch holes through this. Now if I was to go to my eraser tool and delete these circles, they just fill that back in. Let's also go to our rectangle tool. Just draw some rectangles on here. Now we can right click on different pieces and choose erase. So again, as long as you're breaking a surface with an additional closed loop of coplanar edges, we can remove pieces and start to model in additive and subtractive ways. So in the next section we're going to take a look at additive and subtractive modeling. So please click on that link at the bottom for the next part 3.